I'm very concerned about the way the message of Christianity is being distorted in our country right now. I think it's a cause for deep concern. I feel it's an abuse of the faith, and I have to be very careful because I'm not perfect in my understanding of what it means, to be a perfect Christian. I'm not a perfect Christian and I'm not a perfect American, but I think we are walking on very thin ice now. I would encourage anyone who buys a Bible to read the Bible, and in particular to read the teachings of Jesus, and then to set our policies, if we're going to call ourselves a Christian nation, against the highest aspirations that Jesus calls us to.
The Right Reverend Marianne Edgar Budde, Bishop of Washington, D.C., who has emerged as an early poll star of the second Trump resistance from Face the Nation there. It's Thursday, January 23rd, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Sticking with that topic to start this morning, we can thank Bishop Budde for kindly and calmly shaking a great many Americans out of their depressed doldrums as more of us begin to realize that Donald Trump and the massive political advantages he's constructed for himself and the billionaires at his side can be resisted. And that fight is more evident nowhere than the Texas state capitol. Investigative reporter Stephen Monticelli, longtime thorn in the side of the hardcore white supremacist Christian nationalist movement in Texas, has a solid early rundown on how Texas Republicans are looking to impose their distorted version of the teachings of Jesus onto all of us with a series of bills in the works in Austin even now. One that would allow, quote, an employee of a school district or open enrollment charter school to engage in religious speech or prayer while on duty, unquote. Another that would allow public school boards to require, quote, every campus of the district or school to provide a period of prayer and reading of the Bible or other religious text on each school day, unquote. Of course, the one that requires all public schools in Texas to, quote, display in a conspicuous place in each classroom of the school a durable poster or framed copy of the Ten Commandments, unquote. And one that would require the State Preservation Board to set up a Christian nativity scene on the state capitol grounds every Christmas season. We've talked a lot here about the inner workings of the Christian nationalist bunch, largely on the information that Stephen Monticelli has uncovered, all about the doctrine of the Seven Mountains Mandate, recent talk of the so-called Jezebel spirit, which is code for any woman who dare stand up to these ideas, the role that oil billionaires play here, i.e. a major one. Nice refresher from Stephen and the barbed wire linked in the show notes. A big early moment for the session yesterday from Pooja Salhotra and Jasper Shearer at the Texas Tribune, who write that budget drafts from the House and the Senate have been filed, both including $1 billion for private school vouchers, signaling confidence that they'll be able to get those plans across the finish line this session. That's twice the voucher spend from previous failed attempts. There are raises for teachers here, a $4,000 pay bump, and even more for rural teachers, encouraging, but the Trib says those figures fall short of what public school teachers have asked for. Both also earmarked $6.5 billion for the funding of, quote, current border security operations, unquote, meaning Operation Lone Star, meaning any prior talk of drawing down our state's super expensive paramilitary funding games down at the border now that Trump is here to help appears to have been exactly that, empty talk, and anything but fiscally conservative. A great big spend of $10 billion on our water, broadband, and energy infrastructure is here too. In that first area, water is increasingly, and some would say finally, beginning to find its proper place in the conversation, which of course doesn't necessarily mean smart or equitable action on water resources from our Republican-controlled legislature, which will always focus on business and billionaires first. Kaylee Hunt at KERA in Dallas writes on a new report from the nonprofit public policy organization Texas 2036 on our future water prospects as things stand, and that report is grim. It predicts a long-term water deficit if we fail to develop new supplies and get hit by another multi-year drought. That drought is frankly a when more than an if. Jeremy Mazer with Texas 2036 says, quote, if we don't have reliable water infrastructure, then we likely cannot have the continuation of the Texas economic miracle. But one of the more alarming findings was that if we don't have enough reliable water supplies and have a long, severe drought, then the reliability of our state's electric grid could come into question, unquote. The report recommends upwards of $150 billion needed to even begin to tackle these issues over the next 50 years in Texas. One part of the state already feeling that pinch is the Corpus Christi area. Dylan Bedour writes for Inside Climate News and the Texas Tribune that the Corpus Christi City Council has resorted to the leasing of nearby land with wells from which they plan to pump millions of gallons of groundwater per day into the Nueces River, the region's main water supply. This is just after the city enacted its strictest public water use restrictions in 30 years after its two main reservoirs dropped below 20% capacity. This is happening in a metro area that 600,000 thirsty Texans call home, but has also somehow ended up hosting a variety of even more thirsty industrial concerns, including that brand new Tesla lithium factory we've told you about, an enormous plastics plant owned by ExxonMobil and Saudi Basic Industries Corporation, and not even online yet, but coming a major hydrogen export facility, all of which have been granted the rights to millions and millions of gallons of precious water per day to be used for their private profit. Shifting to gun policy here, and another interesting read from KERA in Dallas, Carolyn Love writes on a distinct policy shortfall in Texas that fails in an important way to carry out federal law and the views of the heavily conservative U.S. Supreme Court. Federal law bans domestic abusers that are subject to protective orders from having guns, and SCOTUS overwhelmingly upheld that law just last year in its 8-1 ruling on U.S. versus Zaki Rahimi, a case with origins in North Texas. But still, Texas fails to make these offenders prove that they have given up their firearms, partly in having no system or program in place to take and store those guns. Texas is far more concerned with avoiding anything that might remotely resemble the slightest threat to their fragile conception of the Second Amendment than keeping lethal weapons out of the hands of people who have openly threatened to use them, or even those who have in the past. Finally, it's becoming a foregone conclusion at this point that Republicans here in Texas and elsewhere have taken a decidedly cavalier approach to following the law. Case in point, a new hire by Western wear enthusiast and Agriculture Commissioner Sid Miller, who has just hired back a man he initially let go when he pled guilty to a bribery charge. Edward McKinley at the Houston Chronicle says longtime Miller crony Ted Smith is back in the fold as chief of staff, making a bit over $218,000 per year after copping to asking farmers seeking licenses to grow hemp in the state for grease money. Smith's plea agreement reads in part that he was pleading guilty, quote, because I am guilty and for no other reason, unquote. He was allowed to avoid jail time and paid $10,000 in restitution, but upon bringing him back to this important state job, Sid Miller equivocates that, quote, he wasn't guilty. He pled out because he was facing a George Soros judge and a George Soros district attorney and a Democrat jury in Travis County. They basically slapped him on his wrist and sent him along his way. It's the same thing they did to Trump. Weaponization by the Democrats, unquote. And get ready for a lot more of that over the next few years. Make a note to join us virtually this weekend on Saturday from the historic LBJ Ranch in the beautiful Texas Hill Country for our live stream of the first in-person Texas Democratic Party Chair Candidate Forum. Watch on YouTube Live Saturday starting at 2 p.m. and follow this podcast feed for official post-day coverage. All of this in partnership with the Texas Progressive Caucus and our friends at Unified and moderated by the Barbed Wire. Our funding at Progress Texas is rarely sufficient for us to plan much more than a quarter or two ahead, but the conservative disinformation machine we oppose has no such obstacle. They're funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups. Our regular everyday listeners form a key component of our funding here at Progress Texas, so if that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate, just as Bart Ewald, John Cotter, and Clayton Tucker all have lately. We appreciate all of you very much. While you're at the website, make sure and hit the merch to match your progressive values at our web store. Y'all means all, Revolution, and our most popular Humans Against Ted Cruz t-shirts, all union printed right here in Texas, all waiting for you there, and all great Valentine's gift ideas as well, all at progresstexas.org. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow.